Today's lesson is Dear Deer, a closer look at two titans of the deer family. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike.
I am Roger, and we're going to continue talking about moose and deer. And remember, these animals are part of the deer family, although specifically we're talking about the reindeer, which is a different species within the deer family. And notice the title says Dear Deer. Okay, they're pronounced the same, but they mean something a little different. If you're writing a letter to somebody, you begin by saying, Dear so-and-so. And so we're kind of talking about deer here. So we say, hey, dear deer, we're going to talk about you today. And yes, these are two titans of the deer family, the moose and the reindeer.
Exactly right. We can also say dear in a way to show an affection towards someone. This is my dear friend, or my dear grandmother is having her 90th birthday. That shows we have an affection towards this person. We like this person. We care for them. So we can look at it in a couple of different ways because, yes, of course, I think when a lot of people think of deer, they have kind of positive feelings, right? You don't usually hear about deer attacking and killing people in the wild. And, of course, they have, as we learned yesterday, sort of crossed over from the animal world to other aspects of human culture, right? We talk about how people worship them in native groups. And, of course, today, as we get into reindeer, we have that strong connection to the Christmas story and Santa Claus. So they are definitely deer animals that we do value a lot. All right, let's get into the article today. Today, we're going to turn our attention to the wonderful reindeer.
Reindeer are remarkable animals that are well suited to the harsh Arctic climates in which most of them live. The largest wild population is in North America, where they're called caribou, but the animals are also found throughout Eurasia.
大家好，第一部分介绍形容词 Arctic， 它的意思是北极的。例如 The explorer wore insulated clothing to protect himself from the Arctic cold. 探险家身穿保暖衣物，以抵御北极的寒冷。或者 The meteorologist predicted Arctic temperatures over the weekend. 气象学家预测周末会出现北极温度。
Okay, here in the first paragraph, we're talking about the reindeer. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. You probably heard that song before. They were playing it a couple of months ago during Christmas. But we're talking about the real animal, the reindeer here. They are remarkable animals that are well suited to the harsh Arctic climates in which most of them live. Okay, so they are hardy creatures. They're very strong. And they are remarkable. If something's remarkable, it's worth talking about because it is so wonderful, it's so great, it's so fantastic. A remark, of course, is a comment you make about something. So if something's remarkable, that just means it's something that you should notice. And they are well suited to the harsh Arctic climates. Okay, if something's harsh, it's very difficult. You could say the desert is a very harsh place. If you go to the desert, you got to be prepared, bring plenty of water or whatever. Harsh can also refer to other things as well. I have a very harsh life these days, working really hard. Things have been very harsh for me, very difficult. And the Arctic, of course, refers to the northern part of the world, which again would be northern Canada and Siberia and Alaska and places like that.
Exactly. The areas around the North Pole where, yes, it is definitely harsh. It is tough. We're not saying it's uncaring, as a person could behave in a harsh manner, an uncaring or cruel manner. Nature doesn't do it on purpose, but as Roger said, this is a tough part of the world to live in, and for humans, of course, not many do live up there, but life is tough. It is harsh. It says the largest wild population is in North America, where they're called caribou, but the animals are also found throughout Eurasia. All right, so when we think of reindeer, I think that is the term they use in Eurasia, Europe and Asia, places like Finland, Lapland, going over into Russia, areas like that, whereas in North America, they are called caribou, so it's basically the same kind of animal. If you're in Western Canada, I know that in Banff, the famous national park in Alberta that a lot of Taiwanese people like to visit when they're visiting the Canadian Rockies, they have caribou all over the place. I was there one day and there was a poor caribou. It had gotten its antlers wrapped up in the swing of a schoolyard playground, and it was trying very hard to rip that swing set to pieces to free itself. Luckily, some wildlife officers came along and managed to calm the animal down and release it. So you can find caribou even in urban settings in parts of North America, and they are definitely an animal that is worth learning about, and so we're going to do that, learn some of the basic facts and data about it in the next paragraph, I should say.
Categorized into forest and tundra-dwelling subspecies, reindeer can weigh more than 250 kilograms and stand 1.2 meters tall at the shoulder. Forest reindeer live in or near forests year-round. In contrast, tundra reindeer graze the tundra during warmer months and migrate to forests only in winter. Moreover, while forest reindeer live in small groups, tundra reindeer gather in huge herds of many thousands during the October mating season. Both subspecies have cloven hooves and thick coats that change from white in the winter to brown in the summer.
第二部分看到这个动词 categorize， 表示将点点点分类，或是将点点点归类为。例如 It is difficult to categorize the singer's musical style. 那个歌手的音乐风格很难归类。或是 The warehouse workers unloaded the boxes from the truck and began to categorize them. 仓库工人从卡车上卸下箱子，并开始对它们进行分类。接着看到动词 graze， 指动物吃草，用牧草喂食，或是放牧的意思。例如 The farmer's herd of cattle were grazing in the field. 牧场主人的牛群在牧地吃草。也可以说 Several cows were grazing under a tree. 有几头牛在树下吃草。下一个介绍名词 herd， 表示兽群。我们可以说 The farmer has a small herd of cows that he keeps for their milk. 那个农夫养了一小群乳牛，以便取得牛奶。又或者说 From our vehicle, we saw a herd of elephants cooling off in the river. 我们从车上看到了一群大象在河里降温。
Okay, so again, we're talking about reindeer, and of course, there are many different kinds of reindeer. So, categorized into forest and tundra-dwelling subspecies, reindeer can weigh more than 250 kilograms and stand 1.2 meters tall at the shoulder. Okay, so here we've got the word categorize. You know what a category is? Category. That just means you put things in different types. You group them in different types, how they're different from others, like the different categories of music. For example, there's jazz, there's blues, there's rock, there's classical, etc., etc. Those are different categories. But here we're making it into a verb to categorize, and these deer are categorized or separated into these different categories. And the categories are forest and tundra-dwelling subspecies. So, of course, if it dwells somewhere, it lives somewhere. So there's the kind of reindeer that lives in the forest. They're forest dwellers. Tundra dwellers. The tundra is the northern part of the world where plants don't really grow. You've got this permafrost there, and it's very difficult to grow plants there, so it's very difficult for people to live in parts of the world like that. So they live in the tundra, and they live in the forests.
Exactly, tundra, yes. A lot of the soil underneath the ground will be frozen 12 months of the year, even during the summertime. And as you said, this is above what we would call the tree line. So not a lot of trees up there. Part of the reason it's such a harsh environment. Very tough for animals to live up in an area that's so cold, where they have so little shelter, and where the ground is hard, or just below the surface, it can be frozen and hard all year round. And that's a pretty good size, but compared to the moose that we learned about yesterday, it's about half the weight, and at the shoulder, it's almost half the size, a little bit more than half the size of a moose, but still a very mighty animal. It says forest reindeer live in or near forests year-round. That makes sense with their name. In contrast, tundra reindeer graze the tundra during warm months and migrate to forests only in winter. Okay, so they travel around a little bit more. We're contrasting these things, or we're saying in contrast, forest reindeer live in one way, and of course they live in the forests year-round, meaning all 12 months of the year. And in comparison, or in contrast, this other type, the tundra reindeer, they graze the tundra. This is what, of course, a lot of these vegetarian animals do, these herbivores, animals that only eat plants. They graze, right? When you see cows and horses or goats or sheep in a field and they're busy with the grass, they're busy sort of cutting the grass, eating the grass, that is called grazing, all right? So it's not hunting, it's just sort of moving around an area and vacuuming up or consuming all of the plant material that is tasty and ready to eat. That is how these types of herbivores, these types of plant-eating animals get their food. And so they'll do that in the warmer months when the tundra is growing grasses and small flowers and weeds and things like that. And then they'll migrate or travel and move as birds migrate, of course, north and south, depending on the season. The tundra reindeer will migrate into the forests in the winter where they get a bit of cover, where life will not be so windy and cold and things like that.
Hopefully there's enough food to go around in the forest for those different kinds of reindeer. And moving on here, it says, moreover, or in addition also, while forest reindeer live in small groups, tundra reindeer gather in huge herds of many thousands during the October mating season. So here we're talking about how social they are. We've got forest reindeer, and they just live in small groups. You know, they're just like a tight little community of maybe 5 or 6 individuals. And in this particular case, though, we're talking about the tundra reindeer. They gather in huge herds. Now, we've got the word herd here, which refers to a large group of animals. We've got different words for different groups of animals, like a gaggle of geese and a school of fish and a pack of wolves. But here we're talking about a herd of reindeer. You could say a herd of moose, a herd of elephants. You could use the word herd in that particular case.
Cows too.
Yes, indeed, a herd.
A herd of cows.
Or even a herd of dinosaurs, as if they were living. I think they use the word herd for them as well. And yes, indeed, they get together and they have big groups of people, thousands of individuals during the mating season of October. That's when the boys get together with the girls and make baby reindeer.
Exactly right. Both subspecies, both the forest reindeer and the tundra reindeer, so both of them have cloven hooves and thick coats that change from white in the winter to brown in the summer. So cloven hooves. Hooves are basically the foot structure. This is a word we would use for the foot and the foot structure of animals that do graze, animals that do travel in herds. So cows have hooves, horses have hooves, goats and sheep, I believe, would also have hooves. It's different from a paw. Paws would be seen on hunting mammals, so dogs and cats and lions and tigers and wolves would have paws, but these types of animals would have hooves. And these are cloven hooves, I believe. Basically, that hoof, that hard sort of bony structure that serves as their foot, is kind of divided into 2. I don't think a horse would be a cloven-hooved animal, right? Horses' hooves are usually kind of one solid piece, whereas a thing like a cow and deer, certainly, they have kind of a division. It's almost, you got a little line at the front, and if you actually lifted it up and looked at the structure of it, it's basically 2 pieces that act as the one hoof. And of course, the singular of hooves is hoof, H-O-O-F. So you might say that that horse has hurt its hoof. We should take it to a vet. And generally, horses will have 4 hooves, and you might put horseshoes on the hooves to protect them. In this case, though, they both have thick coats, and these coats can change from white in the winter to brown in the summer, giving them natural camouflage, allowing them to hide against the white of the snow and save themselves or protect themselves from hunting animals like wolves or polar bears or things like that. So that's a little bit of the, the basic biology and some of the little differences between different types of reindeer. So let's get back into the article after we hear the third part, where we get into a little bit more of the human-reindeer relationship.
For thousands of years, reindeer have been important to the indigenous peoples that live in the Arctic Circle. The Inuits of North America, the Dukans of Mongolia, and the Sapmis of Scandinavia and Russia all traditionally followed the migration of reindeer, using the animals for transportation, clothing, and food. And of course, who could forget that these hardworking beasts spread Christmas cheer every December by pulling Santa's toy-filled sleigh?
第3部分看到名词 migration， 意思是动物迁徙或是迁移。例如 Climate change has affected the migration patterns of various animal species. 气候变迁已经影响了许多动物物种的迁徙模式。再看一个例子 Migration allows animals to find better resources and avoid harsh weather. 迁移使动物能够找到更好的资源，并避开恶劣天气。另外补充这个字的动词 migrate, M-I-G-R-A-T-E, migrate. 可以说 Some animals migrate at specific times of the year to ensure survival. 有些动物在一年中特定时节迁徙以确保生存。或是 Many animals migrate long distances to find food and water. 许多动物会迁徙很长的距离来寻找食物和水源。最后看到 transportation 这个单字，它是名词，指的是运输、输送、 也可以是交通工具。举例来说 The city is building new roads to improve its transportation system. 该市正在新建新道路，以改善交通运输系统。或者 Public transportation often gets crowded. 大众运输工具经常很拥挤。
Okay, here's the third paragraph. It says, for thousands of years, reindeer have been important to the indigenous peoples that live in the Arctic Circle or in the area around the Arctic Circle. So if we talk about indigenous peoples, we're talking about different nations, different groups, different tribes of people. These are people that lived in the area from early times. Like here in Taiwan, of course, we've got lots of indigenous people like the Amis, the Atayal, the Bunun, etc. Those are all indigenous tribes. You could also describe them as peoples. And these indigenous peoples live in the Arctic area, and reindeer are important to their culture.
Exactly. So let's look at some of these different native or indigenous groups. The Inuits of North America, people who live very far north, igloos. In America, they are often called Eskimos. In Canada, we use this term Inuit. So think of these native tribes in the very north of Canada, places like Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk in the Northwest Territories. The Dukans of Mongolia, very interesting. So much closer to us here in Taiwan, northern China, kind of southeastern Russia, I guess you would say. Mongolia, very flat lands there. And the Samis of Scandinavia and Russia. Samis, interestingly, the only Aboriginal group in Europe. The only native group that still exists or is still recognized as a indigenous or native group in Europe is the Samis in basically Finland and going over into Russia, an area of the world that's kind of known across both sides of the border as Lapland. So if you go to the Lapland region, that is where the Samis live and that's where they come from. But all of these groups, a very diverse range geographically from North America through Europe all the way over to Mongolia, they all traditionally follow the migration of reindeer, using the animals for transportation, clothing, and food, in the same way that many of the Aboriginal or native groups in East Africa sort of live off cows, right? Your wealth is measured in cow. They get their food from cows. They get their clothing from cows and all sorts of things like that. The same is true with the reindeer for many of these native groups following the migration of the reindeer. So kind of like with the Native Americans in North America who used to follow the migration of the buffalo. They used to live off the buffalo in these huge herds. In the same way, when the animals travel through the seasons looking for greener pastures, looking for areas with food, avoiding the harsh temperatures of the cold north in the winter, going south when they can. So that's migration, animals moving around, depending on the season, depending on the availability of food and other things like that. And also they use the animals for transportation. So they're using these animals to get around. I don't think you're riding a reindeer, but pulling a sled, pulling a sleigh across the snow and ice would kind of make sense. Think of Santa Claus, of course. Transportation is going from A to B. The simplest basic form of transportation for humans, of course, are our feet. But now we have bicycles and airplanes and cars and boats and taxis and all sorts of things. That's all transportation. So they're moving around with the help of the reindeer. They're getting clothing, of course, from the reindeer skin and fur to keep them warm. And food. Yes, you can definitely kill some of the reindeer. Either you hunt or you have, as a sort of farmer, as a rancher, and you can eat their meat during the cold winter months.
And the meat of a deer is called venison, just for your reference. And of course, who could forget that these hard-working beasts spread Christmas cheer every December by pulling Santa's toy-filled sleigh? Yes, of course, we all know about that. A sleigh, of course, is some kind of vehicle or a mode of transportation that can go through the snow. Let's go for a sleigh ride. It's lovely weather for a sleigh ride together with you. And yes, indeed, the sleigh of Santa Claus is filled with toys that he flies around the world and gives to all the good little children of the world. Okay, we're at the end of our explanation for today. Here comes Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分第二句写到，北美拥有最大的野生驯鹿群。那么文中的 North America 后面它接了逗号 where they're called caribou 来补充说明他们在北美被称为 caribou。那么 where 在这边就是当关系副词。 Where 当关系副词相当于介系词加上 which， 像 at which 或是 in which 等等，那可以引导关系子句来修饰或补述说明跟地点相关的先行词。好，那我们来看一下，当先行词它是明确特定的地点时，那就不需要限定它的范围咯。这时候关系子句的功能是对先行词做补充说明，我们就要用逗号把这个补充说明的部分跟主要子句隔开来，这是属于非限定用法，就像我们课文的用法。好，第二个，当这个先行词它是非特定不明确的地点时，这时候就要用限定用法了。Where 的前面不加逗号，那这时候关系子句是要去限定先行词的范围。举例来说 This is a place where you can feel a sense of belonging. 这是一个让你能有归属感的地方。那先行词 a place 一个地方，它是不明确的地点，所以后面紧接着关系子句来限定它的范围，表达是一个让你能有归属感的地方，所以这时候 where 的前面就不加逗号咯。课文第二部分有一句提到，森林驯鹿过着小群体的生活，而台原驯鹿在10月的交配季节则会聚集成数千只的庞大鹿群。那文中它用到名词 herd， 是指畜群、兽群，那它是用来描述群居的动物，像是牛啊、马、大象、鹿等等。所以我们说 a herd of cattle 或者是 a herd of deer， 就是指一群牛啊、一群鹿这样。那这边要帮同学们补充一些表示动物群体的单位词，英文里面有许多修饰群体的计量词，那随着对象不同，用到的计量词也有所不同。好，第一个补充的是 flock 可以用来指人群、羊群，或是用来描述鸟啊、鸡等等体型比较小的动物群，像 a flock of tourists， 一大群的观光客， a flock of birds， 一群鸟， a flock of sheep， 就是一群绵羊。第二个补充的是 pack，P-A-C-K， 它通常用来描述狼或是犬类。A pack of wolves 就是一群狼， A pack of wild dogs 就是一群野狗。第三个补充的是 swarm，S-W-A-R-M， 那这是用来表达像蜜蜂、蚂蚁等等这一类群聚型的昆虫的一群，像 a swarm of bees 就是一群蜜蜂， a swarm of ants 一群蚂蚁。好，第四个补充的是 cloud， 它可以表达在空中集体移动的一群，像 a cloud of bees， a cloud of flies， a cloud of mosquitoes 可以表达一群蜜蜂啊、一群苍蝇、一群蚊子。那么第五个补充的是 school， 它常常用来描述鱼群或海洋生物，像 a school of fish， a school of dolphins， a school of whales 就可以表达一群鱼啊、一群海豚、一群鲸鱼等等。好，那么以上就是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Remarkable. Domingo has made remarkable progress in learning English this semester. Harsh. Life in the jungle can be harsh, with high temperatures and lots of mosquitoes. Herd. We saw a herd of cows in a field as we drove by on the highway. Indigenous. Indigenous cultures are important to New Zealand's history and identity. Migration. Climate change is forcing some animals to change their migration patterns. Transportation. The transportation of medical supplies to remote areas is often challenging.
Discussion Starter starts now!
It's time now for our discussion starter. The question is, could you share some stories or interesting facts about moose or reindeer?
Well, of course, we have the Christmas story, right? Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, Blitzen, and Rudolph. I can't believe I actually remembered all 9 of those. Sometimes people say Santa's sleigh is pulled by 8 reindeer, but they often forget Rudolph from both the song and, of course, the very famous Christmas poem, The Night Before Christmas, I think is the title of it. So that's one that's very, very well known. And I know, Roger, you were thinking of a moose that's also famous in sort of Western culture, but not from an old Christmas story, from a very funny, 1960s cartoon.
Yep, Bullwinkle and
That's
Rocky.
right.
Of course, that reminds me of my grandfather because he likes to watch Bullwinkle cartoons.
Okay.
And Rocky the Flying Squirrel.
That's right, he's a squirrel, and
Right.
his friend is the moose.
That's right. So, of course, that's a famous cartoon. But yeah, it was a long time ago. But you can probably find it on the internet, Bullwinkle. And I think I'm going to watch some cartoons after today's lesson. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I am Mike.
See you next time.